Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are around the world, and welcome to another episode of Endurance Chat. I'm Marcus Salavari, and today we're taking a look back at the WC round at Spa-Francorchamps, the first round of the brand new LMH era. And doing that with me tonight, I have with me Oliver Troavis. Ollie, good to have you back on the show. How have you been the last few weeks?
WEC's back, baby.
WEC is back.
Yes.
How good was it?
Oh, it was good. It was exciting. Yeah, as you said, debut. It was new beginnings. It was all lots of storylines to talk about.
And we've got plenty of time, plenty of things to talk about. Before we jump into that, we must first say thanks to our sponsor, the RacingLion.app, your motorsport calendar. Jump in, get in your notifications for all the sessions and series that you want, and it's all converted into your time zone, which makes the math super easy. And instead of making me do it, which I hate. And before we even get into the WEC, we've got another thing to talk about. Holy shit, Penske and Porsche are back, baby! Dude, I'm so hyped.
Yeah.
I am so hyped for
The
this.
return.
Oh, yeah. Because Penske are just serial winners. I mean, depends on how you define serial winners in terms of their DPI project with Acura. But still, Penske are serial winners. They won overall races in an LMP2 car with Porsche. And this is the revival of a relationship that goes back 50 years. It was 50 years next year that Penske put the 917 into the Can-Am series. So it's awesome. It's an awesome revival of that incredible, iconic brand association. I'm so excited.
When you think of OEM combos, in terms of like teams that run them, you've got the Audi, the Yoast kind of combos, and they're like the pinnacle. And then you compare this and it's just like side by side. It's like, wow, this is quality.
Yeah, I would be, with that in mind, I would be very surprised if Porsche didn't come in and just start winning. And I mean, we always say this about Porsche. That is what they do. They come into series and they start winning. And it took them most of a season the last time they were in the WEC, but I would not be surprised if it took them like 2 or 3 races to just be winning in the WEC or in IMSA with Penske as their backers. The interesting note on that, though, is that it's Penske for their global operation. So normally, like last time we saw them in the WEC, it was Porsche doing the 919 in-house and running the 919, Porsche Motorsport running the 919. Do you think that is what do you make of that?
I think it's the key is in terms of looking at how Penske plan things. In terms of, the way things are done in the US is different. If you take a US crew and transplant them into the WEC, there's going to be a few teething problems in terms of, the way the pit stops are run, the way the strategies run is completely different. But if you transplant the systems and how they optimize to those different regulations, then you have the trust in Penske in terms of making the most and maximizing. So I don't think it would necessarily be transplanting people from America. But it would be the way that they plan at a high level and execute everything to the nth degree. Yeah. And making, perfection out of everything.
And we, as I said, we've seen that in everything that they do, from supercars to IndyCar to question mark over DPI, and we'll leave that there. But NASCAR as well, they do it to the nth degree, and it's going to be awesome. We'll leave that there because we do need to talk about the WEC. It's been a little while since the race, enough time for us to sort of get our heads together and sort of settle into what the new WEC is. First off, straight off the bat, what did you think? What did you think of the product? Or what did you think of LMH as a product, as a racing product, and the broadcast and all of those sort of things? Ollie, what did you think?
I think the broadcast was great. I was looking forward to it a lot. Having arguably the best crew around in commentary, and also having Louise Beckett back and Duncan Vincent in the pit lane. It's so good to have the connection between the commentary booth and the drivers and the teams. They follow every little detail in the pit lane, and add to the product. It was so good. Yeah, broadcast was great. There's little I can think of to fault it, to be honest. And there was more in terms of content put on social media, in terms of Duncan Vincent doing some great stuff on Instagram, Facebook, and on the app, doing paddock walks, showing off bits of the track, highlighting with slow-mos the compression in Eau Rouge, and showing the plank scraping along the ground, things like that.
Man, how
just
good was
adding
that
a little
sort of
extra. Yeah, and then the slow-mo during the race over Radion, and we'll talk about the qualifying as well, the slow-mos there.
Yeah.
Just the quality of the camera work is just so polished. And then there was also a little extra with Alan McNish, who's absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
And he was doing some bits pre-race. There was some
cartoon
descriptions with the cartoon. It was good to break things down, and hopefully we see more of that. I just would like to see it more in terms of implemented within the race, because it's kind of not highlighted when it's kind of just this little clip that's like never, or it is not very visible.
Yeah.
So if they integrated that sort of content in terms of the commentary, doing it on the fly in the booth if possible, I think Alan is someone who could, be capable of that.
Absolutely.
With his background.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Alan McNish, to me, should be the WEC version of what we have in Supercars with Mark Larkham, like the hub
100%.
area that he's got there. Like, just give him the freedom to be like, I've noticed this thing on this car or this corner or whatever. Give me 5 minutes to explain it with a screen and with examples, and it'll be the best thing ever. I did quite like the sort of feature thing that he did that went up on the YouTube. I'm not so sure about the format, the cartoon. It's a little like kiddie to me, but in terms of actual content, it was very, very well done.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of void for that. I always remember at Shanghai last season when he was doing a track walk and just talking about the difference in the tarmac of that circuit compared to the rest of the season, and it was something that was quite interesting. And I think if they push for that, like if there's something in general like G-forces, or there's something track specific like we were talking about with Eau Rouge and the compression, and designing the cars to withstand the suspension, setting them up to withstand that compression, that's something that's track specific. If they did those things throughout the season and maybe put them on YouTube that's more accessible, Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing, then that's good. I think it's great to market towards kids because we want kids in STEM.
Yeah. And that's like your entire shtick, isn't it? You want to get kids into STEM.
Yeah, and but then it's also a fine line, or a tough ask to try and market towards kids that may be getting interested in STEM, but also the adults. And there is a massive spectrum of people that are following the sport. There's some that might have an engineering background, a technical STEM background, that will be more interested in the finer details. But then you have the younger people who are just getting started with studies that might like the more cartoon, approachable, higher level things. So it's super tough. They probably have already had these discussions when designing this sort of thing. But in general, more the better.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you on pretty much every single count. Just quietly, just everything. It was just so good to have such a polished and put together broadcast just back again. The graphics, people have their qualms about the graphics. I quite like them. I think they're very clean. I don't
see the point.
Yeah,
I don't see a problem.
Yeah, I think the MotoGP graphics are unequivocally the best graphics in motorsport. V8 Supercars comes close, but they're looking for slightly different things in that. But these are perfectly fit for purpose, and they do a very, very good job of that. Having Louise back alongside Duncan, it was just so nice. Just the questions that she can just put in front of a driver. It's just incredible. I had to ask, I think, because Graham Goodwin was dropping into the live chat with us, I had to ask him whether or not she was getting fed this information. She was like, oh no, she just does that.
He's on the ball.
It's just incredible.
Super on the ball.
But
another quick thing about the broadcast, because it covers all classes. And speaking of graphics, number boards. What do you think of the number boards?
I feel like this is going to be controversial. I hate them. I want the old ones back.
Yup.
Yeah. And like, there is a sound reason why as well. I don't just hate them because they're artsy and, oh no, they're changed. Legibility and immediate legibility is very, very important in motorsport marshalling. So I've marshaled a bunch of events, you know, you've heard about that all before, either here or in V8 chat when that used to be a thing. The way that you identify cars that aren't Formula 1 cars is by their number. So imagine having a crashed car, a crashed Orica that's blue, and you can't see the number because it's some whatever font. How are you meant to communicate to not only the other marshal posts, not only your marshals at the post, but the race control and the guys who are, you know, taking on the whole event, if you can't read the number, if it's in some dumb font that just doesn't sit with the rest of the car? It just, the standardized number formats are important, and I don't think the number board is the appropriate place for the cars to be expressing their personality. There you go, I said it.
Yeah, I completely agree. There is the safety aspect. The teams aren't, especially in P2 and GTE-Am, they aren't hindered by corporate whatever.
Yeah.
They have the freedom to design whatever they want over the whole car. So I think we need to rein it in a little bit and protect the graphic designers from themselves.
Yeah, and Zodiac makes a great point in chat. There was a penalty for one of the Otosport car that was given to the wrong car. Was that due to the number boards? Like, come on, guys, this is not... whatever. Social media stuff has been... I think the uptick in social media content has been incredible for the start of the WEC, and I know that it is because of a change in their social media approach. So if anyone from the WEC ever listens to this, keep doing that. That was great. More stuff with Duncan. More stuff with Duncan in the pits. That was brilliant. That's like exactly what you want in terms of being engaging to bring people in and get them excited.
Yeah, Duncan's great. You can tell he's super excited, and he's really good at explaining things. Like there was one quick thing in the paddock when he was talking about why the cars are with their engines on like 20 minutes, half an hour before a session, and he was just explaining, then going into, you know, how the engines are designed and in terms of the tolerances of how they're made and making sure everything's warm and why they need to be warm and stuff like that. And it was on the fly. It was really good.
It was just, yeah, he's a consummate professional. And one thing as well about the commentary team, you could tell how much fun they were having. Like, oh my god, the you know, Haven cracking wise, Graham cracking wise, Alan cracking wise. It was just, there was a few times where I didn't know where to groan or laugh, and I think that was just, they hit the nail on the head in terms of the tone, and we know that from the WEC comms, and it was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, I think we've exhausted that.
Cool.
It was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about what happened on track. And everyone was concerned about the new class, what we saw in testing. They were going, oh, it's overlap with the LMP2, and they might need to slow the LMP2 even more. And it turns out that they had some pace. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought?
Spooky.
Yeah. And it turns out they didn't just have some pace. They had some decent pace as well. I think the race lap times, you probably know better than I, but they were 2 to 3 seconds a lap faster than LMP2 cars. Sure, it wasn't like what we've seen in the past where they'd just be like running away from them out of corners, but there was still consistently quicker than all the other cars, even the Alpine, even the Toyotas and the actual LMH were faster than all the other cars, except for including the Alpine, except for one period of the race, which we'll talk about a little later. But I pose a question to you, Ollie. How do you think it looks? Does it look like a top class? Does it have the same sort of feel? Does it feel like it's fast?
I've always said it's a downgrade. Moving towards the kind of converged era since LMP1H, it's kind of these cars were going warp speed. Let's not forget. I think the balance between LMP2 and the top class is difficult because yes, it was made to look worse at the start of the race because these LMP2s, when they have a clear track, like we saw with the top times for all the headlines in all the practice sessions and everything, they are super quick. But then when you look at the race pace, when the track is all, a homogeneous mixture of cars everywhere, the LMHs are much better, or made to look less worse, I guess. Because to describe it, the 22 had a great start and was kind of holding up the Alpine, and it couldn't really get past it in the first stint. But then when the Alpine came up to other P2s later on, and coming to lap or past the 22 potentially later on, it wasn't so bad. Yeah, it was about 7 laps or so that it was kind of finding it really hard to overtake, and so on a clear track, these P2s they've still got a really really high top speed, and they don't the top class doesn't have that punch out of a corner that the P2s don't have. So that's where the big difference is. Yeah, and in terms of lap times, a couple of seconds between the top lap times of a P2 and a kind of top lap time of a top class. The top class, they're more likely to be able to hit that or be close to that top lap time because they're all pro drivers. Yeah. Whereas when you have a P2 with a silver or a bronze that they have to run, then they kind of naturally fall back. So I think it's okay. And, sports cars has had this history when we had the LMP 900 and the LMP 600, where they were the kind of two different classes, and either one of prototypes could kind of punch. Now, LMP 900s were kind of more favoured by the regulations, if I remember correctly. So it was kind of rarer for an LMP 600 with this lower power to actually compete for race wins on a regular basis. Like these P2s, then they're not going to be regularly running at the front of races overall. But it does add a little extra spice in terms of holding up the top class potentially, like we saw at Spa. But also, if there are any problems for reliability, then they could sneak a podium or, maybe do a 2017 and almost win. Or, at Le Mans.
I still think that was the craziest thing in the world. And as an aside as well, it wasn't too far off for the LMP2 cars in terms of snagging a podium. They ended up finishing only a minute behind the top hypercar class car. And it wasn't actually too far-fetched to think that was a possibility. And we'll talk more about the comings and goings in LMP2 a little later on, specifically Phil Hansen, because that was whack. But let's focus on the LMH class and the sort of problems that Toyota had. And it was all on the 7 car. Now, I'm not sure if this was because the number 7 car was the car that had problems in the prologue, and so the team just wasn't up to the standard as the other half of the garage. But it seemed like everything that could have gone wrong in that race for Toyota went wrong on the 7. They had pit troubles. They had a few offs in the number 7, like a really weird off for, I think it was Nakajima. No, it was Kobayashi. Yeah, at the Bruxelles hairpin, where he just went straight off in a straight line, like missed his braking point by miles. They had a weird lack of pace in patches as well. Like, what were your thoughts on that? Was the number 7 just underbaked?
Yeah, I think it did feel strange going into this race in terms of the lack of running. It looked like they prioritized all of their development onto one single chassis to just try and get it to really push the homologation, like we've seen with Glickenhaus deciding to delay with Toyota, they really pushed hard to get to that deadline of homologating for the first race, because they wouldn't stand the embarrassment of not being there.
Oh, of course not.
And so I think they really pushed hard on that one car, and then they had to catch up with the second car. Teething problems, making a new car from scratch.
But even the Toyota, the number 8 wasn't immune to problems. Do you remember the pit stop drama that they had, where they had required by the regulations to be filling the car for a certain amount of time, and they pulled the fuel out of the car dropped and went away, and then stopped and was like, oh no, what do I do? I think Boemi came over the radio going, do I stay or do I go? It just seemed scrappy, and I'm not sure why. We don't normally see scrappy from Toyota.
Well, I think we do in some respects, but in the last couple of seasons, they've kind of had the buffer to get away with it. But then moving into this balance of performance formula, where the gaps are a lot more compressed, they're going to be shown up, and these small little issues are going to become more significant ones. Whether it's human error in terms of the fueler pulling the hose out, for reference, all fuel hoses have to be on for 35 seconds to kind of equalize the fueling differences because of the different amounts of fuel that the different cars use. And the fueler pulled the hose out, presumably when the fuel flow stopped, just like he would have done for years before. You want to pull the hose out as soon as possible and then the car can go, but they can't do that anymore. Regardless of if the fuel is flowing or not, they need to hold the hose attached to the car. And so that's human error, unless there's a system that he was blindly following, like on the numbers they have a little number dial counting either flow, volume, time, one of those parameters. And it's just not good enough in terms of what we expect. So yeah, they're going to work that out. They're going to sort it out. They're going to see what went wrong, make sure it never happens again, so that when there is more competition, they don't make these kinds of mistakes. Because when we have these full grids with dozen double figures hypercars in the top class,
which is soon,
and that sort of issue, if they're in the lead, that could completely lose from the lead to not even getting a podium sort of thing, and potentially getting penalties.
Well, they did get a penalty for that as well.
Yeah.
And it all kind of played into the hands of the Alpine team. They had a very strong run in the middle of the race, unsurprisingly, at the hands of Nicolas Lapierre. You've done a fair bit of analysis on the pace from this race. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, check out Ollie's post in Sports Car Engineering blogspot. So have a look at that, which is on the sub as well. Because he did a very good job of putting together a visual representation of the balanced performance. Ollie, did the Alpine actually have a chance this race, in your opinion?
Yeah, for sure. They were very consistent. They did pretty much everything they could. The trouble is, we'll talk about the pit strategy later, but in terms of what happened on track, regardless of the pit lane, they were very consistent. They were very good at just tapping away those lap times. There is a bit of discrepancy between the Toyotas and the Alpine, around 3 or 4 tenths on average. So the balance of performance is measured on the top 60% of the race laps. And if you take a measurement window of each car's top 60% laps, the Alpine is around 3 tenths or 4 tenths slower than the fastest Toyota. Yes, there is a pace discrepancy on track, but I think the key difference is what happened on track. They need to really be lucky with their pit stops. They have a fuel allowance, which has gone up since the LMP1 hybrid era. So the last 2 seasons that these cars have been racing, the fuel allowance has gone up because the new top class has got heavier and with more power for the hypercars and LMDHs. So the fuel that they need to move that heavier mass is at a higher power is of combustion engine has gone up.
Yep.
So the trouble is though that these LMP1 chassis are the same, and they don't have they can't just click their fingers and have more volume inside the car to fill more fuel in. So they've been given in the rules more fuel than they can fit in the car per pit stop. So they can't actually do it. So if they balance it to, a finger in the air, then sure, they're balanced in the pit lane. But these cars, they aren't, imaginary. They're real. They're tangible. These are things that the ACO know. These are things that the ACO could have planned for. They know the volume of the
Alpine fuels tank is limited at 73 litres, and they were given 75 or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but on the exact numbers. But it was a bit of a joke, and so yes, the Toyota, they have the marketing benefit of having a one fewer pit stop potential, going longer on fuel, that sort of thing. But when you're in a balance of performance formula where they should be the same, and they are trying to equalise pit stops, it was a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
And for this 6-hour format, that is hardly ever going to change. That's pretty locked in. Yeah, sure, there are differences between circuits and how long each car can go slightly, but it's not really going to be different for the other 6-hour events. We might see it closer together or further apart at the next round at Portimao, where it's an 8-hour format. Yeah, I haven't run the numbers for an 8-hour format scaling up from 6, the stint lengths, but man, that is, I think, the biggest detriment to the current top class. And hopefully we have seen Alpine be a bit vocal on this issue, and I think the ACO are able to sort it. They just need to try a little harder at this sort of balancing, because there is a discrepancy and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, well, it certainly is a discrepancy. So the end result was that the Toyota could go maybe, 23 laps on a tank, whereas the Alpine was limited to about 21. And the difference there was because the Alpine they were allowed. So I've actually found the numbers. It's 79.5 litres of fuel per stint, and they only have a tank of 75 litres. So they, square peg, round hole here, except your pegs are fuel and the hole is the fuel tank. So in the end, that resulted in an additional stop for the number 36 Alpine, and you remove the slow down pit fuel and release time of the additional stop, and that's about a minute. And how big was the gap at the end of the race? About a minute. So it's one of those very close run things. And let's not forget as well, the Alpine was leading the race at one point, and leading quite substantially. So it certainly does have the pace. It is absolutely not a pipe dream that the Alpine could, on a better strategy, or say if Toyota make a few mistakes like they did at Spa-Francorchamps, that the Alpine could be in with a good result. But you would have to say that defeating one of the Toyotas to take second place is a good result. If you'd offered them that at the beginning of the week, they would have taken that, wouldn't they? Yeah,
and let's not forget the sort of darling LMH debut angle, the cynical take.
And you're all about the cynical take.
Oh, yes. The ACO, they want their new baby to have the limelight. The first hypercar class has an LMH winning it. Of course, it had to be. So, if you think of it that angle, and with a positive spin rather than a double negative spin, once that is out of the way, now those headlines are out of the way, they can now get on to actually racing properly, kind of thing. So they've
I hope they do.
They've handed Toyota their win. Now let's get on with it and do it properly.
Absolutely. So we'll see these cars out next time at Portimao. which is in a few weeks. It is the 13th of June for the 8 Hours of Portimao. I'm keen for that. It would be nice to see WC at that track. We should also be expecting one Glickenhaus car in Portimao. They have done their homologation, so they've done their 30-hour test. So we will see one at the track. And with Ryan Briscoe, Romain Dumas, and Richard Westbrook. So we've figured out all the drivers and we figured all that out. I am keen to see where Glickenhaus slots in on this. Do we think they'll be ahead of the Alpine, or do we think they'll not have that outright pace just yet?
It's difficult to know because the Alpine is not built to LMH regulations, so or any regulation for the hypercar class, as it were, for the long-term hypercar class. So it's kind of being bodged into this performance window, and it would be really nice to see how a non-hybrid LMH also works in that performance window. You know, whether the BOP is actually in theory really close and the Alpine is not getting close to that because it's an LMP1 and it's quite held back, and yeah, there's so many different variables. I have no idea where it's going to sit. Also, it's a new car.
Yeah,
teething problems maybe, hasn't raced. They haven't raced in the ACO racing. They've mainly done Creventic with the GT3 based style thing and N24 VLN.
Yeah.
So and also Yost returning. There are so many different variables. Same thing with the drivers. Romain Dumas hasn't been in the top class for a while. He's been doing P2 stuff.
Yep.
Same thing with Briscoe and Westbrook. I don't remember them doing top class stuff in a while. So, you know, there are so many different variables that, you know, add up into making it look like a rough shot at winning at Portimao. Especially because it's a longer race as well, 8 hours as we mentioned.
Yeah, so I'm pretty keen to see them. That's a gamut of things that you've given us there to think about. If they have a clean race and Toyota has another stinker, I think they'll be in with the result. And of course, that's, you know, if, but. But if Toyota have a similar race to what they had at Spa, I don't think that they have the outright pace to win if they're going to make that many mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, like you mentioned, the biggest problem for Toyota was the problems with reliability and pit stops mess. You know, if there's a car that is closer on pace because it is built to the LMH regulations and therefore easier to balance on paper, then, you know, Glickenhaus could have won at Spa.
Absolutely.
So,
but we said the same thing about bicollars. We said the same thing about bicollars at Le Mans in 2017. You know, had they just been there, had they been running, they would have won. But they were broken down in the first hour of the race. If. I actually do want to raise one thing before we move on. You made mention that the drivers, you know, Briscoe, Dumas, and Westbrook, haven't had top class experience for a little while. Is that such a bad thing? You know, this is a serious adjustment from what we were seeing with LMP1H specifically, and where we are now with LMH. And I vividly remember, particularly Brendan Hartley, you know, saying that it was a adjustment for the drivers to the point where they were basically having to relearn how to drive a top class car again. You know, the braking points are all wrong, the turn-in points are all wrong, it feels heavy, passing traffic's harder. Is it such a bad thing to have people fresh to that and with no preconceived ideas of how it should look? Because to me, that sounds, you know, part of the reason that the 7 had so many offs, particularly Kobayashi's off at Brussels. It looked to me like that was I'm braking where I used to, oh wait, I've gone too deep.
Well, it's the same thing with Jose Maria Lopez when he punted the Porsche off at the last corner, the last chicane. Yes, that is a good point, that sometimes it's better to join from a clean slate when there's such a difference. But also, when it's harder to lap a car because the paces are closer and you're more likely to have these 50-50 lunges, I think it is better on average to have someone who is a lot more used to that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's the way I would put it.
Cool. We'll press on from LMH, a decent first outing for the new class, and it's only going to grow from here, so plenty of reasons to be excited. We'll look into LMP2, and despite the late performance adjustment before the first ELMS round a few weeks ago, the LMP2 class still looks as terrifyingly fast as it used to. And as well, despite being put up to a gold rating, Paul Hansen looks absolutely terrifyingly as fast as he used to. I was very impressed with him as a Super Silver. You know, even as a Super Silver, there's some times you just have to be impressed by his performances. But even as a gold-rated driver, he was doing things that, like, the fully fledged professionals for 10 plus years couldn't do. His performance at the beginning of the race was up there with some of the best LMP2 performances I've seen. So big ups to Phil Hansen. I realized about 5 seconds ago I said Paul Hansen. No, it's Phil Hansen. He was just unstoppable, and it was United once again doing their thing in the LMP2. You know, we've been doing this show for the last 6 years, and the last 2.5 has been, United won again.
I had my doubts, to be honest. I
absolutely.
I probably said it in going into picking cars. I was super doubtful in terms of how Phil could step up, because, as you said, he was only just uprated. Whether he would be able to make that development forwards into being a justified, proper pro. But the way he had his elbows out and defended against a car faster than it at the start of the race, it was brilliant. And then because they built that gap, they could manage the gap for the rest of the race. Like they had so much clear track, they could just tap away fast lap times, and it compounds. It makes you look better because you don't have to defend and against or during the massive scrap behind, because the P2 class is so big and competitive. Everyone from second back, they were all squabbling for pretty much the whole race.
Yeah.
Whereas United, because they built up that gap, they could just tap away clean lap times.
And that they absolutely did. They ended up winning the LMP2 category by about a minute. The official time lists it as a lap victory because they were a lap. They crossed the finish line ahead of where the Toyota was on track, so they got to do another lap. But it would have been about a minute on track, and if this is the way that LMP2 is going to be, little darling, hey, I'm all for it. United Autosports are a class outfit, and if they are that good, then hey, let them be that good. It was just incredible. I don't really know what more to say.
It's United, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just United. Yoda Sport blocking out second and third, at times actually blocking out second and third. How about that moment for Blomqvist with the Alpine going through Eau Rouge? that one certainly raised the eyebrows.
Yeah, to be honest, I thought the Alpine was going to end up going over Radeon upside down.
Oh, so, absolutely.
There were a few flashbacks to a bright blue top class car going airborne, potentially. But how the hell did they both get up the hill safely? Wow.
Yeah.
I think they weren't.
I think if they had hit any, more one ahead of the other in either direction, that would have been an airplane crash. But I think because they made contact exactly flush side to side with each other, or at least center of mass side to side with each other, they just somehow managed to sneak their way through. But that shouldn't be possible.
Maybe it was because the Alpine was also Orica based, so they kind of matched perfectly panel side by side.
Yeah, but we are joking, but that's actually a pretty scary moment, and the ACO came down pretty hard and actually gave Blomqvist some penalty points against his license. So huge penalty in context actually. So let's see if I can actually find the actual wording drive through and withdraw of 2 penalty points. And I don't think you get all that many penalty points in terms of the WEC. I think what is it, 10? So dangerous driving
I think
was
it's on an FIA, on your FIA license. So,
yeah.
And it's also quite rare for that sort of thing to happen as well.
Yeah. I can't, off the top of my head, think of another instance where this has happened in the WEC.
Exactly.
Yeah. But Jonas blocking out second and third. What did you think? I didn't expect that heading into the race. I knew the cars were strong, but I didn't expect them to be that strong.
I thought they were good. And I think it was also good that it's quite difficult to like not take me the wrong way, but I think it was really good that the car, I can't remember which number, but the one with Sean Gallale in wasn't being talked about.
Yeah,
because
28.
It's parts of the Asian Le Mans series was quite difficult in terms of, he's really bad, KFC, haha, all that,
yeah,
whatever. Like he was really good in that there were no issues in arguably a more difficult scenario, higher speeds, Spa. That's a tough track
and a world championship
right for amateurs.
Well.
Yeah, higher level, more pressure, and it was absolutely fine. Like he did what he needed to do, was just tap away lap times without having any troubles and letting your pros do the rest.
And they did, the whole team as a whole did really, really well. I'm happy to see the number 38 really return to some prowess. To be honest, I'd kind of forgotten about Jota Sport and the 38 and the Gonzalez Da Costa Davidson grouping. They haven't had a good run, like a good consistent run of seasons, so I've kind of forgotten about how good they are as a team. So is this the second coming of Jota? Are we seeing Jota start to try and dislodge United from the mantelpiece?
I think it's going to be exciting, this kind of battle of the big British P2 teams.
Oh, I forgot they're both Brits as well. Oh, that's gross. Yeah, that's gross.
It's going to be good because they have everything, throwing massive punches, all of the different criteria. You've got great amateurs, you've got great pit crews, you've got great engineers setting up the cars. Yeah, it's going to be a massive brawl throughout this season, and yeah, I can't wait.
Don't get too excited. Something to mention as we finish up on the LMP2, Racing Team Netherlands, 4th place overall, the debut win for the LMP2 Pro-Am category, and you honestly can't say another team deserved it. They were fighting out with the front runners at the very beginning when Fritz got in the car. Fritz got in the car in the lead of LMP2, by the way, ahead of both United Autosports and the Jota cars. Of course, he dropped away. He's a bronze. He owns supermarkets. He's not a fully fledged race driver. But solid recovery from the two pros, and they end up in 4th place overall. 4th place for LMP2. So that's a really solid achievement for the team, and I don't think anyone can complain.
Yeah, let's not forget at the prologue or during free practice, they had one of the drivers, Job van Houten, right off the car pretty much.
Oh yeah,
and then the previous race for WEC here, there was a massive shunt at Blanchimont for Fritz van Eerd.
Yeah,
against was it Thomas Laurent?
Yeah, he wasn't the one who had the shunt, but he kind of tagged Laurent, who was passing him plus traffic, which put Laurent in the wall.
Exactly, and he's had issues here in the Dallara as well. So for going into it, he was quite nervous vocally on social media coverage and videos and things like that, because this racetrack needs to be respected, and we had seen a lot of damage from the prologue and free practice and qualifying. So for him to convert that into a relatively clean run and then let his two superstar teammates to do the rest, it was great.
It was great. The next car down the list for the Pro-Am category was the Real Team Racing car, Garcia Duval and Norman Nato. They finished a lap down on Racing Team Netherlands, and the pair actually sandwiched into Europol competition. So 5th place for Schmeikowski, Van der Zande and Alex Brundle. I am well impressed by that. I mean, I know Van der Zande and Brundle is a star pairing in terms of the pro drivers, but in the past, whether it be the Ligier or a lower quality of driver, we're used to seeing the Bakers a bit further down the field, in at least in LMP2. So good to see them get a good result in 5th. And
yeah, it's a solid start.
Yeah, and Bujoc made a great point in the live chat. It's not bad for their first race in the WEC.
Yeah, it's a building block. We'll see Smichowski develop, and the driver lineup is absolutely brilliant. So it's going to be one of those that are going to be nipping at the heels for podiums, that's for sure.
Who disappointed in the LMP2 class for you?
WRT. That's my pick.
It was mine too. We both got taken in by the honeypot, and you have no idea what we're talking about. A, you got to get in the Discord server and be a part of our live race chats, and B, you got to get into MW Clarkson's fantasy endurance competition, because both of us picked the number 31 car, and both of us got burned by, what was it in the end that was the problem? A power steering line or something?
It was a bearing in the clutch.
Oh, yeah, that was it. And so they spent too long in the pits repairing the clutch. And to be fair, though, they were in a competitive position before that ailment befell them. So it was encouraging signs for their first WEC race. Not quite as dominant as their first ELMS race, but it makes me sad.
It's going to be cheap for the next round.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Also, what happened to the G-Drive car, the number 26 car? I've completely forgotten that it was even a part of the race.
Good.
Oof.
They were a bit... They were in the running at the start, weren't they, with Rusinov starting?
Yeah.
But then they slowly slipped further and further away.
They had a problem at some point because they're not classified in the results. So it's the number 26 car, because the 25 car was the Pro-Am car, and that slipped away a little bit as well. In fact, a lot of the cars finished 2 or 3 laps away from the leaders, so I'm not sure why that is the case. But yeah, the G-Drive car expired with about an hour and a half to go. So
it's surprising though, because they had the best amateur driver with the new hotshot Franco Colapinto.
Yeah.
So they had all of the pieces they needed, but it was run by APR, and they had some shenanigans in the pit lane, didn't they?
APR and their shenanigans, and it's one of those things because we've seen G Drive with incredible teams, with the top rated teams, with Yoda Sport, with TDS, with on-road competition, back before the Ligier JSP2. We are used to seeing them be in teams that will execute everything, but APR, despite all of the pros of being with APR is not one of the top level teams, and I'll put my hands up and take all of the flack for saying that, but they are not a United Autosports. They are not a Joda Sport. They are not a TDS. They're just not at that level.
Yeah, they were made to look a little shite with the issue driving into your own team's spare wheel just as it was getting fitted to the other team car.
Back at Barcelona, yeah.
Yes. It's just all these little things adding up to when you're looking at them, especially in comparison, like you say, with the last few years of the perfect runs. It's kind of a bit embarrassing, which I'm okay with.
You're brutal, and I love it. Turns out it was an oil leak for the number 26 car, which I'm pretty sure was the same car that had the oil leak at the Asian Le Mans series, and it's once has happened since twice is coincidence, maybe. I'm not sure.
That was kind of a bit ridiculous at the Asian Le Mans series.
Oh yeah,
I think they were needing like a litre a pit stop.
Yeah, well, they were
oil, which is
shortening their stints to fill the oil back up because they lost 20 litres of oil across the course of the race. It was ridiculous. So they ended up getting meatballed in the WEC race. So that's why they came in.
It was oil dripping on the track.
Yes,
I think
yes. So LMP2. Any other thoughts, hopes, or dreams?
I was astonished in the position of Real Team Racing. Did you say they finished 5th in class?
6th in class, 2nd in Pro-Am.
6th in class. 2nd in Pro-Am. Their bronze was nervous at best. It's a massive step up for him. As a bronze, previously doing LMP3 stuff. I think he's had quite a steep trajectory in terms of doing Michelin Le Mans Cup, then ELMS, then
LMP2 WEC,
and then now straight up to P2 WEC, which is super competitive. But yeah, as we mentioned, super good team. I recognised a few of the mechanics and the chief mechanic for TDS, who was usually with the favourite team, was at G Drive. Then he moved to Racing Team Nederland, and he was then the top mechanic for Real Team. So it might be the case that Real Team have some of the best TDS guys running the team as well. They have really good pros in that car that are carrying it. So if Gonzalez
Garcia,
gets better and more used to it and more comfortable, then I think this could be quite an interesting fight for LMP2 Pro-Am within the same TDS garages.
Yeah. Just as an aside, just to complete the picture, Esteban Garcia's fastest lap time was let's have a look at this one. It was a 2-minute 12.6. He was the slowest LMP2 driver of the field, and his lap time was only 1 second faster than the fastest GTE Pro lap time of the weekend. So he certainly has a way to go in that respect.
Yeah, you could say that again. Compared to the fastest bronze, he was around
9 seconds.
3 or 4 seconds a lap slower.
Yeah. At peak
for
speed.
The fastest bronze. And on average. And then on average to the lap times of the fastest silver, who's Franco Colapinto, that was around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. So quite a significant difference. So for them to snag 6th in class is pretty damn good.
It was a big surprise.
Absolutely. And we said the same thing about Ultimate at ELMS, and they ended up taking Pro-Am honours and 5th overall. So if you are listening and you hear us say a team is not worth watching, keep an eye on them, because apparently they'll do something good.
Yeah, don't listen to us.
Nah, not at all. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll be back with a bit more on the GT side after this. Yeah.
This podcast is proudly supported by The Racing Line. The Racing Line is a motorsport calendar and notification app for iPhones and iPads. It includes all major series, with more being added all the time, giving you a daily and weekly list of races so you can easily see what's coming up. All events are converted to your local time zone, so you no longer have to faff around, adding or taking away hours to work out start times in your area. Finally, it also lets you customize notifications for events, so you can choose when you're notified about certain race series. The app is available on the iOS App Store. Just search for The Racing Line. Find out more at www.theracingline.app. Now, back to the podcast.
Welcome back to Endurance Chat. I'm here with Oliver still, and we're going to be talking about the GTE race from Spa-Francorchamps now. And god damn it, the number 92 did number 92 things again.
Stronk. Porsche stronk.
And you can't really deny them that strength because they were strong all weekend. Like, even the prologue, they were doing ridiculous things. And as an aside, Kevin Estre, like, broke the GTE lap record in qualifying by a lot. It was like a 2:11, which is terrifyingly fast.
He was in a class of his own the whole weekend.
Yeah, you had GTE Pro, well, GTE-Am, GTE Pro, and then GTE Kev. Like, that was the way that it worked out. It was just kind of nuts. And you did some analysis again on your sports car engineering blog on the GTE race. I'm looking at this graph, and from outright pace, like in terms of just their 5 fastest laps, the Porsche was just untouchable. They were a second faster across the 5 fastest laps than anyone else.
Yeah, I think part of that is down to the start of the race.
Yeah,
where they had a just like the United, I think they had a bit of a buffer. So on a clear track, they could just tap away clean laps, whereas the guys behind, they were squabbling, which held them up on a clear track before they started to be getting lapped by prototypes. It takes, I don't know, maybe 10 laps before or 15 laps before they start getting lapped. And so that kind of exaggerates the gap, usually to the first car in the class, unless there's an overtake into turn 1.
That's still quite a significant gap. I haven't seen gaps of like a second in that sort of realm before. Like, that's impossible. And the Porsche still had quite a leg up over the rest of the field. Looking at your lap time traces, they were the fastest car from most of the race. There's just a significant step down on their like 50th best lap or 50% best lap, where they're now more aligned with the rest of the field. But they were just completely untouchable.
Yeah, I think Porsche were on another level in terms of their performance that weekend, getting the most out of their GTE package. They had more pace than I think they actually even showed, because they were on a fuel saving strategy for that car as well, for the winning car. So that's why I think their sort of gradient of lap times through this plot that I'm looking at is difficult to explain, but they're kind of dropping off their pace more than the Ferraris. So I think that's maybe because they were fuel saving a bit more. So arguably they have even more to give. Maybe we'll expect this to be changed for Portimao in terms of the balance between Porsche and Ferrari. They weren't too bad, but because there are fewer cars in the class, it's kind of highlighted a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Compared to what it was before.
And this is the first time in the WEC we have seen only the 2 brands in for a full season. I mean, the Corvette was there as well, but they didn't really have the best race. They almost had a chance at a podium, but with the with one of the cars, one of the Porsches having problems. I'm trying to remember. It was the number 91 that got hit by the Toyota. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So that dropped them down to 5th, and so last in class. And then the Corvette was looking like it might get a leg up on one of the Ferraris, the number 52, I think. But in the end, they just didn't quite have the legs over the tail end of the stints, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a weird one because they weren't the proper Corvette team. They were supported by Labra Competition, who were, historically amateur only racing. So yeah, there was some angle you could take there when you've got a fully factory Porsche team they're going up against, for example.
Yeah. Or AF Corsa and Ferrari as well.
Yeah, exactly. They were okay. They at the start of the race they were hanging on to the coattails of the class in front. I think they were overtaken into turn 1 by Ben Keating, which was kind of a bit embarrassing. But then once they got past onto the tail of the GT Pros, they could cling on. It's just they started to fall back a little bit. And then, once that happened, they were kind of running their own race. They were okay. It's not really. They weren't really going in for a proper result. They were going in for setting up for a go at Le Mans, which hopefully we'll see them have this season.
Oh yes, please.
Yeah, it's good to have the C8 around the world rather than just in the US. And more Corvette is better.
More Corvette is better. But unfortunately, we will be seeing the last, at least in a race, of Oliver Gavin, your alter ego. He, in his last event, he put on a great show, and I think with Louisa's interview after he stepped out of the car for the last time, that was a properly emotional moment.
Yeah, it's lovely storylines and these sorts of narratives that's really beautiful in sports cars. You've got heritage. You've got how long is his streak? 17 years at Le Mans, maybe.
That's pretty close. That's still a far away from the longest streak at Le Mans, but that's still a pretty respectable effort,
especially in the modern era.
Absolutely.
And it's emotional, and it's something that's really cool what he's done with an American brand.
As a Brit,
England. Yeah, exactly. So hopefully we see more of him as he transitions into not being a racing driver. He's doing more coaching things and maybe some microphony talky things.
I was about to say, hopefully we might not see much of him, but we hopefully will be hearing something from him in the future. Fingers crossed.
So good. We wish Ollie Gavin all the best, and the same thing for Corvette.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think he'll get drafted in as a third driver at Le Mans, or do you think that's absolutely it now?
I think it will be lovely. Let's not forget, Corvette also lost Jan Magnussen as well, so he's going to be in the new Dane train with his son Kevin at High Class Racing. So there's a spot potentially. It would be pretty cool because usually the GT Pro cars have or GT-Am cars have two drivers, and then the longer races they add a third. I still see him able to be that drop-in third endurance driver, so hopefully that's something. But if not, he'll probably be in the booth as an ex-driver, adding to the commentary quality,
which would be cool enough in itself as well. The Ferraris had I don't want to say anonymous race because they weren't anonymous, but they couldn't stand up to the pace of particularly the 92. If you are an AF Corsa pit mechanic or an engineer, are you worried about the pace of the 92, or are you expecting that to get balanced back before we get to Portimao? Both?
Yeah.
Elaborate.
Like the pace of that 92 was scary, and I would hope that it would get balanced.
Yeah, fair.
I would do a little Collado, and be unhappy about it because you want your red car to be winning all the time. It is was a bit shocking. Yes, sure. Kevin Estre is, Kevin Estre. And that's the justification for them being so far at the front on pace. He shouldn't be allowed to be that far ahead. So can we, have a little bit of help here? So, yes, they were more consistent at reaching their pace as the Ferrari compared to the Porsche. So they have that sort of angle to play going forwards as the Porsche kind of drops off. But yes, whether it shapes out, especially over a longer race, that consistency is more valuable than short-term peak pace. But we'll see.
despite their troubles in GTE Pro, it was a happy hunting ground for Ferrari in GTE-Am because Porsche had all the troubles across the damn weekend in GTE-Am. You did not want to be in a GTE-Am Porsche over the course of the weekend because they had one car lost at the prologue with, I think, the number 46 Team Project 1 car damaged beyond repair and with no spare chassis. You had the number 77 Dempsey Proton car crash into the wall at Radeon in qualifying. And then you had the number 56 Project 1 Porsche do literally the same thing. Like, I didn't see... I'd gone to get a cup of tea when the qualifying had gone green and came back and saw the Porsche crash. And I was like, oh, they're still showing replays of this. No, it was the same crash. The same crash. So, not a good time for either of them. And that was qualifying. And then on the outlap, on the recon lap to get to the grid, Mike Wainwright crashes the car in the S's and writes them off of the race. I know
Please.
Like, I know I've been critical of Wainwright in the past, and I know I've been praising Wainwright in the past, but on the reconnaissance lap, and it wasn't even like it was wet, it wasn't even like there was oil on the track, he just spun. He spun and hit the wall.
I was really looking forward to that car.
Hitting the wall.
They had quite a good lineup.
Yeah, they did.
Of co-drivers.
They did. Tom Gamble and Ben Barker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh well. Next.
I cry.
Next race they'll be fine.
By the way, they weren't the only ones to not make it around the reconnaissance lap. ARC Bratislava broke a fuel line or something like that, or had no fuel pressure.
Yeah, they had a fuel leak.
And so they didn't make the start either. So 2 cars out before the race had even started, which is always a great look. Let's talk more about the GTM class as a whole. And you made mention Ben Keating was up with the pros from the beginning of the race, and like if that's a show of how cool Ben Keating is and how much fun he was having driving. Like, he was out of the gate like a hare, and it was awesome to watch.
Yeah, and the some of the GTE-Am teams elected to put their faster guys in at the start of the race, and he was holding them up.
Oh, absolutely.
He was what was it, Matt Campbell he was racing up against, and he was going toe-to-toe for ages, and not letting Matt Campbell get through. He had quite a great start in terms of. Can you remember at Bahrain?
Yes.
When he was basically at the start all on his own, and he basically had a carbon copy of that race, just tapping away in clear track. You know, he could just deal with his own stuff. He didn't have to fight for long. And the same thing with when Matt Campbell got past eventually, he then still had clear track to just tap away until a little bit of a code brown.
Yeah, let's talk about that moment. Keating was the unwilling bystander, or I don't know, the unwilling participant in an incident between, it was one Pablo Montoya, and I'm struggling to remember the other driver.
Roman Rusinov. Okay, well, there's 2 hardheads. If you go to anyone and say, hey, who's the 2 biggest like hardheads in the LMP2 field? Roman Rusinov, Juan Pablo Montoya. There you go. And they came together out of no name. They were running side by side while lapping Ben Keating, and pushed Keating onto the grass on the entry to Pawn. How he kept it out of the wall, I have no idea. But is it reasonable to say, or to suggest, that had that moment not happened for Keating, the TF Sport car could have won the race? Oh, yeah, could have, would have. It's difficult to say. But yeah, they had a good lineup with some actual surprises in terms of the silvers. They had a really surprising silver that came out of, I think, Brazilian stock cars or something like that.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me considering Fraga's involvement in the team as well.
Yeah, but the other guy in the team, their silver,
Pereira. Is it Daniel Pereira?
Dylan
Pereira.
Dylan Pereira. yeah, he's someone to look out for as well. So they had a really good driver lineup, including their bronze and silver. They have all the pieces to take a win. They just need to have a clean race and not get swiped off the track at a high speed corner. That was super scary. You don't want to be going through Pouon on the grass sideways. Luckily, there's a lot of runoff there because otherwise, I think we would have had another written off car.
Yeah, well, he got very lucky. He got very lucky, and part of it is skill as well. The fact that he was able to keep it out of the wall initially, but the interview that he gave afterwards, the interview he gave after getting out the car, was one of the most hilarious interviews. He was just like, "Oh yeah, Montoya, he just got a little too excited and I kind of got rolled up on it, but that's racing, that's what we're here for." He was just having an absolute blast. And so just classic stuff from Keating. And if you are able to find that interview, if you've got, you guys have all access to the YouTube replay because that's already up, so go find that interview.
And I think they clipped it. I think they clipped it as well. I think they have it as a standalone clip as well. So
really? Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely check that out. But they were outdone in the end by less than 30 seconds to the team of the AF Corsa Ferrari of Francois Perotto, Nicholas Nielsen, and Alessio Rivera. Now, Ollie, tell us about Alessio Rivera.
Holy moly.
Yeah. Okay. AF Corsa have just done the thing. They've done the Proton thing where they just find the Porsche young drivers and they just like, okay, have a super silver slot.
Like ×5.
Yeah.
Like, settle down. Okay, I've got some receipts. Okay. So normally you have your amateur drivers doing kind of like the minimum amount of time, and then you maximize your pro drivers' driving time, because on average they're going to be the best drivers. You want them in the car for longest, so then you lose the least and they can keep you up at the front for as long as possible.
Just before you get into this, Nicholas Nielsen was that amateur driver, a year or two ago. He's just been upgraded to bronze, to gold from silver. So in this team, you already have someone who was a super silver now playing the pro.
He's a Ferrari factory driver doing SRO GT World Challenge stuff.
Yeah, so very quality
paper,
pro driver.
Nicholas Nielsen, he's going to be in the car for ages. He only did 10 minutes, I think, over his minimum driver time.
Mental.
He only did 56 minutes of a 6-hour race. Then Alessio Rivera did 3 hours 10. He did double the number of laps than any other silver in the class. Okay, he did double the amount of driver time as the next silver in the class. On average, he was over half a second faster than the next best silver. So imagine that advantage cascading across
3 hours
through though, lots of laps compared to the other silvers. The top 32 laps that the car did was Alessio Rivera's lap times. Okay, Nicholas Nielsen was nowhere. No wonder he only did 56 minutes in the car. He was slower than the slowest silver.
Wow. I wonder if that to me sounds fishy. I wonder if it was a tire thing, but continue regardless.
Maybe. But the thing that adds the little cherry on top, Alessio Rivera's times, he was comparable to the Ferrari GTO Pro times. Okay, he was faster for quite some time against the top Ferrari GTE Pros. He was faster on 1 lap pace, and arguably, maybe it's because the GTE-Ams get more tyres allocated, so he could just burn through tyres, whereas the Ferraris have to conserve. But on the other hand, the GTE Pros are faster. They have a faster balance of performance to keep the classes separate. It's ridiculous what this guy can do.
And to cover off that loop here, there was, on outright lap pace, so this is just peak performance, there was one driver in the entire LMGT field, not LMGT-Am, LMGT field, that was faster than Rivera, and that was Kevin S. One driver, and it was only only by a second, but that means that Rivera was faster than every other driver in the class, in the GT class, pro or am, didn't matter. This kid is ridiculous.
He's broken the class. Like,
yeah. Absolutely.
At its core, it like, I don't see, if this is how it's going to be, I don't see any competition other than maybe the Keating car. Like, it's completely broken. Yeah. Honestly, it's quite scary to look at, especially if you're a fan of any of the other teams in GTE-Am, because it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
In turning up if you're just going to be fighting for third place at best.
Yeah, and like, this isn't a new problem in GTE-Am. We've known about this for a long time. I think even David Hennemeier Hansen, when he was in this class, was a very vocal, outspoken, data-driven arguer about the way that this class was going. And like, now we are here, and this is what happens. And he has a silver rating, and that's completely within the rules, but against the spirit of the rules, I would argue.
Yeah, I mean, motorsport is all about pushing boundaries and finding performance anywhere. And, you know, it's on the FIA for not doing their driver rankings correctly, because this guy, he is a massive outlier. And honestly, it kind of brings a bit of GTE-Am into a bit of a laughing stock. Which is a bit of a shame, because in the last couple of seasons it's been really competitive. I don't know what they can do, to be honest, mid-season to hold them back. Maybe they do an emergency success ballast, like they did for the last few seasons or last season, because you want to keep your other amateurs in the class happy. I think they might start to get a little bit vocal about this in the next few months, because going into Le Mans, like, if this guy is going to be doing hours and hours and hours and hours in the car at this pace, he's going to be they're going to have like a lap advantage over the rest of the class.
It's going to be mental. Yeah.
So, I think they need to do something about this.
I tend to agree. And, you know, you could definitely see who the sneaky silvers were, because they were, you know, first and second. Dylan Pereira as well. That might be a name that some people remember from Porsche Super Cup, where he was one of the front runners in the BWT team as well, alongside Jackson Evans, who himself had quite a decent race until the car broke down not too long from the end, and, you know, starting a chorus of "No, my pick" in the Discord server, me included. So yeah, it's kind of a taking advantage of a system that almost works, but that almost is
it's the lesser of two evils.
Yeah. And well, just as a side, the pair of them finished a full lap ahead of the third place team, which was actually Settler Racing, which was a little bit of a surprise.
This brings back around to the whole point where they're basically everyone else is just fighting for third.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a participation trophy at the moment. So, yeah, we'll see. Maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's not. But, yeah. And another way to go from it, in terms of it being the lesser of two evils, having this kind of factory backing of silvers versus generic, real, in inverted commas, silvers. What do you think about moving towards an LMP2 scenario where you have two unlimited drivers? So you still have the bronze mandated, like LMP2 Pro-Am, but then you have the freedom to pick a driver lineup for the era that we're moving into, in terms of Pro GT on the slide, or Pro GT everywhere on the slide, more manufacturers moving to the top class. For manufacturers that aren't in the top class but want to be represented in GT, maybe in future with GT3s, there's more of an opportunity for pro GT drivers to find a drive with a bronze in GTE that way around. So I think it will be an opportunity for OEMs to showcase their driver talent, and also it then brings the issue of driver rankings to be the bronzes, and that's I believe would be easier to get right.
Yeah, that does solve a lot of problems. I think if you do that, you run the risk of, I don't know, losing a little bit of personality from the class. You know, the fact that you don't just have the bronze complication, but the silver complication as well is I think quite attractive. The question comes in, you know, how much does that get abused? And the answer to that in recent times has been, well, a lot. I would love for teams to operate under the spirit of the rules and regulations, but you know, that's definitely not what's been happening. Because, you know, if you did that, then you might lose guys like Tom Gamble or Gomez, but I'm not sure that's, you know, too much for loss, to be honest. The Iron Lynx car that might have you know, that's going to be something that's going to be quite affected. But the thing is, I don't want your answer solves a lot of problems, because you still have those guys there if you need them to pay, or if you want to have the sort of driver ladder that you get with the factory backed cars. I don't know. They'll
still want their young pros in the car to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can have, you know, Jackson Evans just in the car.
You're going to have more stability as well as they grow into being professional drivers.
Yeah, but I'm not sure a ambitious team is going to develop young drivers. So, like, if you were just AF Corsa and you have Perotto dropping money on your lap, might as well give him Molina and
Pro,
Bird. Why not? Like,
yeah.
Like, if he's willing to pay for it, then might as well. And then you start to lose the likes of Rivera and Pereira and et cetera. So, I don't know. It's not an easy problem to solve, which is why I'm glad I don't have to solve it.
A fair point, well made.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it in terms of the Spa race. It was a good race. I thought it was a good race.
Yeah, it was enjoyable.
I have
there
nothing
was always
else
something
down.
going on.
I have nothing else written down, so no other talking points from my end.
It was brilliant entertainment all the way through. There was always something going on. There was ebbs and flows. There was genuine drama or
intrigue,
possibility or intrigue in the top class. Every class had something going on, and it was brilliant.
Yeah, and quite honestly, it was just so good to have back. And I think it quelled a lot of people's fears around the new class and how it would all fit together and all those sort of things. I think having that Spa, because Spa always does this, it's always just a settler. You know, even if it's a frantic race, it's just, yes, the WC knows how to put on a race. And yeah, they did a great job. So, well done to the WEC on these new regulations. We have a Portimao in a month, in 4 weeks' time. Do we need to see any more changes? Does there need to be a bump up in LMH or a drop down in LMP2? Does there need to be balance of performance adjustments in GT? Do things need to change?
Just little tweaks. I don't think there's anything like systematic that's wrong. Just little tweaks that we expect from, you know, an auto BOP process which uses race laps to improve, using feedback loops kind of thing.
Yeah.
It will converge to a better solution, hopefully. Portimao does have a really long straight, which will be interesting to see what the P2s are like at top speed going into turn one. We're going to have some potential spicy dive bombs into turn one.
I am so keen for that.
We saw from F1, where you just send.
Full send.
Exactly. Portimao, great track. Can't wait. Lovely flow. Drivers going to love it. It's going to look great on camera. Can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be good. We've got Bujok in the chat saying, leave LMP2 the hell alone. And I agree with that. We've had so many question marks around LMP2. Just leave it the hell alone now and let's get on with it. And we're going to get straight onto it because ELMS is racing this weekend at the Red Bull Ring. So hopefully I will have this podcast up and edited by that point before race start. And that's what, about... Oh, it's less than 24 hours away. Oh, God, time goes so quickly. Let's have a quick look at the Red Bull Ring to start with. This, in my opinion, is one of my favorite tracks in the world. It is just a speed demon's paradise. All the corners, except for the tight hairpin, really flow into each other, and you can really build up a head of steam. It's a perfect track for prototypes, in my opinion. Who might it favour in the ELMS paddock? Remember, we're talking P2s, P3s, and GTs. Who do you reckon is going to be the ones who has the car best set up for maintaining their momentum?
Just go out on a limb and say Team WRT, maybe. Because they're just so bloody good.
And not United?
Yeah, United are good. I was pleasantly surprised by Tom Gamble's performance. Yeah. That was kind of my unknown going into how he was doing in LMP2s. But I think WRT, yeah, they're almost locked down to getting a good result. Now that's tough to say because of what happened, what we were talking about earlier in terms of reliability. But if they've got a clean race, they're going to be right up there. So
yeah, and just having a quick look at practice times from yesterday. I was going to say last night, but for most people it would be yesterday. It was United Autosports in third place, G-Drive Racing in second, and Algarve Pro at the top of the timesheets in free practice 2, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. Manchada, Ferdinand Hatzberg, and Richard Bradley. I'm pretty well surprised by that, to be honest.
Yeah, but it will shake out in the race, I think. Yeah.
And that is only free practice 2 that we're looking at. I haven't actually had a chance to have a proper look at the free practice 1 times. There's of course, one of the things that we've been talking about in LMP2 has been the bodywork changes. They started the season by saying, okay, after the first race, you're going to have to change the Le Mans spec. And then they got to the WC and said, no, everything has to be in the Le Mans spec. Now, after the WC, they're going, okay, the ELMS can stay in the normal spec and the WC has to be in Le Mans spec. What are your thoughts on the changing specifications for the bodywork?
It's a bit clunky.
Yeah. Do you think it's a good choice for the ELMS cars to stay with the high down, with the option of the high downforce spec?
Yeah. So for the teams that have never gone to Le Mans and aren't going to Le Mans this season, it's a tough ask for them to suddenly buy new bodywork and spares that they've never used before and just say, yeah, you've got to use that. And then all of the front ends that you've got and rear wings, I think, have changed. They're now trash.
Yeah.
You're never going to use them. All of the testing that they've done over winter and in spring before the first race, trash data. The only thing that's good for is amateur drive time, getting used to a car, which actually is changing. So part of that, getting them used to it, is trash as well. At least now they don't have to buy this bodywork. But on the other hand, a team that's going to be doing ELMS and WEC, sure, the driver lineups are different, but if they're doing test sessions, then they're going to have to swap setups, and the amateurs are going to have to kind of do double duty, learning how the car feels with the Le Mans bodywork and then not, and the setup data is going to be difficult for teams to share within themselves. If you've got a United that's dialing in their setup for their WEC entry, that data will now be less applicable to share with their ELMS team because the cars are different.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
Yeah, and that's already been a factor. I think the Thursday paddock notes from the test, courtesy of Graham Goodwin at dailysportscar.com, said that particularly Dragon Speed, were running in Le Mans spec across the race. And like, Red Bull Ring isn't a Le Mans spec track. It's part of the reason that you have such high speed cornering is because you're running that ridiculous level of downforce. So it kind of surprises me that they choose Red Bull Ring of all places to do that. I mean, you'd expect it at somewhere like Monza, but not really Spielberg.
Yeah, it is a track with a lot of time on throttle, so and high speed, so it kind of would favour a more slippery car, and then you kind of sacrifice that second sector high speed long corner S's, that sort of thing. But yes, we'll see. I think moves had to be made to make sure that the gaps between hypercar and LMP2 were sufficient to keep things safe when you're trying to lap an LMP2. But obviously, we don't have top class LMH in or top class hypercars in ELMS, so that gap isn't needed.
Yeah.
I think it's been clunky. I think the changes should have been directed to WEC P2s solely. It doesn't devalue WEC LMP2s for them having to be slower than ELMS P2s, I don't think. Because it's so competitive in WEC in terms of the driving standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how it shapes out with the difference politically, with comments made by the teams and drivers. But I think it's the best option, the change that was made post Spa-Francorchamps WEC, to keep the ELMS from changing too much. So yeah, I think they got it wrong to start with, and they did the right thing.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you make a point about the ELMS WC crossover in terms of the bodywork not really making too much sense, and then immediately follow up with the LMP2 changes should have been for WC only. Doesn't that then make the divide between the ELMS data and the WC data even grander?
Yeah. But on the other hand, isn't it good that the teams that only do ELMS, like the plucky little teams, punch against the teams that are doing big things in the World Championship?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
You've got a Dragon Speed, you've got Panis Racing, Duquesne, happy
cool
days.
Racing. Yeah. Yeah, like, that's just fair. I just found the juxtaposition of ideas very, very surprising. I mean, I 100% support you and agree with you on that, and I think the teams that do both are, good enough to have two sets of data and just deal with it. I just wanted to shine a light on that, just for your own sake as well. Entry list changes. We have Gustavo Menezes confirmed as the star driver in the Dragon Speed car. Taking over from Ricky Taylor. I hope Menezes actually gets a lap compared to Ricky after Barcelona. Poor dude. Roberto Merri replaces Pietro Fittipaldi at G-Drive because of the IMSA race on this weekend at Mid-Ohio. And I will get the Americans to get their shit together so that way we can do an IMSA catch-up on Sebring and also Mid-Ohio and everything else. Bloody Americans. And also, Gustas Grinbergus, a name you may remember from the Rick Ware racing car in the LMP2-Am, the car that won a Le Mans entry last season. He's jumped in to replace a fellow Lithuanian, Julius Adomafakis, in the number 14 Inter Europol car. So, because Julius returned a positive PCR COVID test. So he'll be making a return to the ELMS P3 grid in the number 14 Inter Europol car. I actually think that's an improvement. I mean, seeing Grimberger's race in person at the Bend, he seemed like a very, very excitable young lad. And if he's getting drafted in as an AM, he would be a good pick for any team, I think.
Yeah, I think he's a great reserve for anyone to pick up. He's a up and coming prospect, so get used to the name.
Oh, absolutely. And get used to seeing, I think, he and a few other names are really beginning this sort of second wave of prototype talent that is specific to prototypes as well, which is really, really cool. Any other thoughts ahead of the ELMS race this weekend, Ollie?
Make time for it and watch it.
Absolutely. It's going to be a brilliant race. Maybe threatened by weather. I saw a few pictures earlier on in the weekend of some very looming clouds, but let's hope that the hills will be alive with the sound of race cars and not the sound of thunder. You can, of course, catch that on the European Le Mans Series YouTube channel. And make sure you jump into that. The race will be there for replay as well after the race is finished. And yeah, there's also IMSA, and check that out if you like that style of racing. I'll probably miss it because it's in the middle of the night, so screw that. Yeah, I think that's everything. One thing that you should do, by the way, is go to Sports Car Engineering and read Ollie's wrap-up of balance performance and hypercar convergence and all that sort of stuff. Not convergence. You know what I mean. Go read that, because Ollie, you did a really, really good job, and it's really good to see them back again. I've missed them over the past year.
Yeah, it was. I was weighing it up if I actually get round to doing it, but finally got over that. And yes, look out for a little bit more coming on the horizon. Yes,
I love it when people do stuff. I love good data-driven OC. I love good OC in general. If you're a listener and you want to just make up something to share with everyone on the subreddit, whether that be data-driven analysis or historical posting or just some stories that you've heard of, go ahead. I love seeing what people bring to the series and to the community. Finally, wrapping up, thank you very much to Racing Line for making this free for us to do, which is great. Love it, and you should all download the Racing Line app, because it means that I don't have to do time zone conversions, which I hate. And thank you very much for listening. I've been Michael Zalavari. Peace out. Best level. Give me your best. Welcome to Endurance Chat.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to another episode of Endurance Chat.
That was Endurance Chat, Intimate Hour. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Endurance Chat.
Looks like I've got you pretty well pegged at where I want you, which is nice.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Slow down, pal.
No, only speed. I am speed.
Hopefully that's a different phrase meaning in Australian.
Have you pegged? Yes, it is. I can certainly see where your mind went. Directly into the gutter, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, well, ooh, yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are around the world, and welcome to another episode of Endurance Chat. I am Michael Zalavari, and today I have Ollie Trevellus to talk to you about... I can't. I always get there. I get there, and I go, how does it go again?
It's been like 3 years.
It has been. Trelliverse. Fucking hell. You know what? I'm just going to read it off the article I've got open. Let's do it again.
No, let's just keep it in.
Nah, we're doing it. We're doing it again.
With it.
We're doing it again.
This has to be the end slate.
Oh, absolutely.